What's good? What's good? I'm back. Yours truly, one and only Paul Pickett, host of the Paul Pickett Podcast, aka Triple P, aka the Common Sense Podcast, your source for music, sports, politics, world events, and much, much more. Today, I'm going to react to a video of Patrick Bet David. His title are "Muslims the Angriest People in the World," but he's talking about Muslim stereotypes and something that I said that Muslims and Christians have in common, and that is the pushback on transgenderism and indoctrinating their kids in school with the LGBTQ community, Pride Month, and all that. But before we get into that, I want to give you a word from promopalace.biz.
For music marketing and promotion? Then look no further than Promo Palace LLC, your one-stop shop for all music promotion services. Services include Spotify playlist pitching, YouTube video promotion, record pool promotion, blog placements, radio airplay promotion, SoundCloud promotion, and much more. With over 2,000 customers and over 10 years of experience in online promotion, Promo Palace LLC is a company you can trust. For more info, please go to promopalace.biz. See you there.
That's right. You heard a beautiful lady. If you need online marketing promotions for your music product, brand, or service, please go to promopalace.biz. You see it scrolling below. Get marketing and promotions at promopalace.biz. All right, let's get into it. It's one of my favorite podcasters, the Patrick Bet David podcast, Valuetainment. I think that's my favorite, Valuetainment. And my number one favorite is probably the Black conservative perspective. And Valuetainment's another one of my top of the list. That's probably my top two, Patrick Bet David and Greg Foreman, Black conservative perspective. Let's get into it.
Are going to get offended. We're going to talk about stereotypes. Last week I'm in the Bahamas. We took a couple hundred of our executive sales leaders there. We're having dinner one night with about 15 of us. The couple sitting right across from me, he's the same person that gave the Quran that I gave to Andrew Tate when I went to Romania. He's a Muslim. We start having this conversation about Muslim, Christians, stereotypes, then all of a sudden it led to stereotypes. Are stereotypes accidentally given to different sects or communities or religions or ethnicities? Or is there some truth behind these stereotypes? He says, what do you mean by that? And he says, are you talking about that Muslims, terrorists, violent? I said, that could be one of them, but why don't we play a game here and see what everyone's going to say? I look at everybody and I say, give me the most famous, uncomfortable stereotypes, even some of them that are popular, one by one by one. One guy says, white men can't jump. Another guy says, Armenians are insurance fraud. Another person says, Germans drink a lot of beer. French are snobs. Jamaicans love to smoke pot. Swedish people are hot. Older people suck at technology. Jewish people are cheap. Asians are great at math and science. Black people have the most fatherless homes. Asians don't drive well. Indians own 7-Elevens and gas stations. Blacks can't be racist. Republicans love guns. Poor people are lazy. Rich people are greedy. So anyways, look, if you're Muslim, some of the stuff you're going to say, that's cool. And that's not.
Yeah. That last one they played, rich people are greedy. Not all rich people are greedy. They're ambitious.
Cool. Why'd you say that? Some of the stuff your Christian community, oh, that's cool. Well, that's not fair. Why'd you say that? We have data. Top 5 countries in terrorism the last 50 years. Which countries marriage works at, which religion, which countries are the most angriest. We got so much different things to look at. But today's topic, a complicated one, we're going to talk about if some of these stereotypes about Muslim is true or not. So if you get value out of this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. Let me get right into it. So look, let's talk about stereotypes. I can't stand stereotypes because I'm Middle Eastern, I'm in the insurance industry, my parents got a divorce. I got so many different stereotypes. So I'm filled with a bunch of different stereotypes. I've been called every one of the things. Oh, you're from Iran, you must be a terror, you must be this, all of them, right? But I'm in the insurance industry, I'm about to start a company, I'm on year 2. We're about to go out of business. I'm down to my last $13,000. I got nothing else left to my name. Zero left to my name. We're going to this event with AIG. We're in Napa Valley. My son is born. He's 6 months old. We're about to go to this, excursion on how to cook and bake. I'm like, babe, you go with my dad. I'm going to stay at the hotel. I'm going to spend some time with this kid. I haven't spent a lot of time with them. They go and they team up with the guy that was running the entire distribution of the company for AIG, big company. And they start having a conversation together and he brings up Armenians. And he straight up asks my wife, hey, how do you feel about Armenians? My wife is white. She says, what do you mean, how do I feel about Armenians? How do you feel about Armenians? There's so much Armenian insurance fraud, and there's so much of it linked that we're going through it at that time, and a lot of other companies were going through it. So she says, you know, my husband's Armenian. He says, I know. And my dad is listening to the conversation. Anyways, they come back. I'm messing around with my son, and I hear them in the living room at Napa talking. Don't tell Patrick. And he's like, I have to tell him if he finds out. I have to tell him. She comes in, she says, babe, I have to tell you what just happened. My dad's like, you can't tell him this. I have to tell him what just happened. Such and such person asked me how I feel about Armenians because Armenians have so much insurance fraud. Boom. I'm furious. Now, the guy who said that ain't lying. That stereotype is actually true in Glendale and many parts of LA. You can look this up. Many companies have gone through this in many different. I personally have some stories of that as well.
And I wouldn't say that would be a common knowledge of a stereotype because he says it's in like Glendale, California. Like out here in Fayetteville, North Carolina, we wouldn't typically know that.
But I don't like the fact that you judge me as that. But it's true partially with some people in that industry. So I come back, we go back to the office. I'm calling everybody. I'm trying to find out what's going to happen here. All of a sudden I find that him, the same guy, and their lawyer from this company are flying in just to meet with me. My guy calls me, my rep, he says, Pat, don't say anything. They may be terminating you today. We're sitting in this conference room in Woodland Hills. He's sitting right across from me. He says, okay, let me just get right into it. I said, before you get right into it, I'd like to say something. He says, what's that? I said, rumor has it that you're uncomfortable with Armenians, and I'm half Armenian. And because recently you guys had to lose and write off millions of dollars of insurance fraud, and you're thinking I'm gonna do the same. That makes me feel very uncomfortable. I'm sorry you're going through it, but here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to give me a shot for 1 year to judge me based on how I run a company, not based on me being half Armenian, half Assyrian from Iran. There's a 20-second pause. My wife is sitting there, Maral is sitting there, Amor is sitting there, all my guys are sitting there, and they're sitting in the corner with the lawyer and him. Takes a deep breath. He says, okay, I get your point. You have 1 year. They get up, they leave. Fast forward 6 years later, the same man who had a stereotype of what was going on with insurance, judged me based on that, at his retirement on a yacht, had 5 people speak at his retirement. The last person that spoke was his best friend. The second to the last person that spoke was me. We became best friends. And I respect this man so much. Why? There is truth here, but our job on whatever sect you are is to try to change it. So I share this with you to tell you, I've been through it, I don't like it, and I simply want to positively change it. So try to receive today's message in a way where you're open-minded. If you're open-minded, we can go through this together. Again, if you're not, don't watch the rest of it. Let's get right into it. So, is the stereotype of Islamic extremism a fair stereotype? According to a study done by French think tank, Islamist terrorist attacks account for 39.1% of the lives lost due to terrorism between 1979 and 2019. And as a matter of fact, here's where the top 5 countries are leading the way in terrorist attacks the last 50 years. Iraq has experienced the most terrorist attacks the last 50 years. Number 2 is Afghanistan. Number 3 is Pakistan. Number 4 is India. And last but not least, in the 5th spot, Syria. Okay, so you may say, Pat, give it a break. This is last 50 years. How about recent? No problem. I have that data for you as well. But I want you to be thinking about this. Out of these 5 countries, 4 out of 5 are mainly Muslim countries. And the one that is not is India. India is 80% Hinduism, 14% Muslim, so that's something to be thinking about on what the religion of those countries are. Well, let's look at 2021. When you look at 2021, top 10 countries in most terrorist attacks, it's Syria, Afghanistan, DR Congo, Iraq, Nigeria, India, Myanmar, Pakistan, Somalia, and Yemen. And if you look at the religion by each country, Syria is 87% Muslim, Afghanistan is 99.7% Muslim, DR Congo is only 1.3% Muslim, Iraq is 95 to 98% Muslim, Nigeria is 50% Muslim, India is only 14 to 15%. We talked about it earlier. Myanmar is 4.3% Muslim, 96.5% Pakistan are Muslims, in Somalia it's 99%, and in Yemen is 99%. So one may say, well, according to this,
7 of them were literally 50% or more Muslims.
I mean, that stereotype is true, ain't it? Okay, fair. Now you may watch this and you may say, Pat, give it a break. I mean, you don't understand what the West has done to the Middle East. You kidding me? With everything with Israel, and Israel's getting all this funding, and they're backed up. And of course, we're agitated, we're angry with this. Okay, somebody may say, well, fine, if that's the case, but your attacks are within each other. You know how they say black on black crime? This is Iraqi on Iraqi crime. This is Afghani on Afghani crime. Not all of it, but most of it, it's happening internally. So then they said, well, what's the history behind it? How did the Middle East get so violent? And as a matter of fact, we pulled up who are the most angriest people in the world. Middle Easterns are so angry. I said, pull up the data. Let's see what Statista Pew Research says about this. And here's what it actually says. Here we go. So the world's angriest countries, number one is Lebanon, 49%. Number two is Turkey, 48%. Number three is Armenia, 46%. And some tells me Armenians are going to be angry because they're not number one on this list. It kind of made you angry, right? Apparently Armenians, if you're watching this, we're angry. Now, if some of the Armenians are watching this one, I don't know if I can argue that because you're pretty angry people sometimes. Fair, maybe we can call it passionate. Number four is Iraq, then Afghanistan, then Jordan, then Mali, then Sierra Leone. By the way, and majority of these countries are Muslim, obviously not Armenia. It's a fair question to ask, why is it that the leading countries in the world that are angry are Muslim? Majority of them, at least. That's a fair question to ask. So let's take a look at the history on why the Middle East is so violent. The instability in the Middle East started with the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. This is what the Ottoman Empire looked like when it was collapsed at the end of World War I. It was a deteriorating 600-year-old empire, entered World War I on the Central Powers, and that was the straw that broke the camel's back. And by the way, this is not that long ago. This is like maybe 100 years ago, 1916, 1917, 1918. Look who was in the Ottoman Empire when you look at the map here. Hungary, Slovakia, part of it. Croatia, Serbia, Romania, Bulgaria, Moldova, Ukraine, Turkey, Georgia, Azerbaijan, Iraq, Syria, Jordan, Israel, Lebanon, Egypt. I mean, I can keep going. This is massive when you look at this. And the collapse of the empire created a power vacuum in the Middle East. The new borders in the Middle East after the Ottoman Empire collapsed were determined by the Sykes-Picot Agreement. This agreement was between Britain and France that was signed in 1916. The agreement divided the Middle East into spheres of influence for two countries. Britain would control Iraq and Palestine, while France would control Syria and Lebanon. So if you look at the Sykes-Picot Agreement right here, you would notice that the pink is the British rule, the navy blue is French rule, and then you got the Russian rule and some of the other guys that's out there. But while this is going on, the Balfour Declaration, a statement issued by the British government in 1917, promised to support the establishment of a Jewish national home in Palestine, where they wanted a place that was safe for them. And at the same time, the League of Nations mandates a system of international administration was created after World War I with mandates that were granted to the victorious powers, and they gave them responsibility for governing the former Ottoman territories. So in other words, the Western powers played a major role in determining the new borders in the Middle East, motivated by several factors, including their own strategic interests, the pursuit of oil, and the desire to protect the rights of the Jewish people, which, by the way, some people say, well, do you see, Pat? All they wanted was our oil. I don't disagree. You're right. In Iran, the same thing happened. British Petroleum in Iran. Hey, we own the oil. Shah's like, what are you talking about? This is our oil. No. You need us. Without us, you can't do this yourself. We're very smart. We got this. You can kind of pump the brakes. And that kind of pissed off the British Empire. Wait a minute. You need us. No. We got this. So that's the part that there is a valid point of the argument that the West kept trying to control, saying, we know how to handle this. You don't know how to handle it without us. So this led to a role of determination of the new borders in the Middle East. The Western powers were aware of the oil reserves in the region, and they were eager to control them. This led to create borders that would give them access to the oil. These borders did not reflect the ethnic or religious divisions within the region, and this led to the rise of sectarianism. So if you've never heard the word sectarianism, think about segregation. Segregation is by sects, by color, communities, by nationality. Sectarianism is more by religion. So again, it's not a positive word. All you religious people go here, you guys go here, you guys go here kind of thing, right? So Sunni and Shia are the two main branches of Islam, and they've been divided for centuries. The split between the two dates back to the death of Prophet Muhammad in 632 AD. After Muhammad's death, there was a disagreement over who should succeed him as a leader of the Muslim community. Sunni Muslims believe the successor should be chosen by the community, while Shia Muslims believe that the successor should be a descendant of Muhammad.
Let me stop there for a second. The only problem I have with that is, how do people know who are descendants of Muhammad today? And how do we know that he even existed? Like, we really don't even know if Jesus existed. And how would you know descendants of Jesus unless you have DNA to compare it with and whatnot? That's the problem I have with some of these things. Like, if these people did exist, how do we know that these people are descendants of them?
Agreement led to the split between Sunni and Shia Muslims and it has been a source of instability and conflict ever since. So like earlier we talked about the Sykes-Picot Agreement, this led to the creation of states with large Sunni and Shia populations that were controlled by families appointed by the Western powers, again, authoritarianism. And since then, this has led to endless civil war between the two. So while all this stuff is going on, in 1948, you know what ends up happening? Israel gets granted their own country in the Middle East, leading to the Arab-Israel War of 1948, which, by the way, you know when the war happened? A day after the announcement of Israel getting their own country.
And you know, I never realized and knew that Israel was that young of a country that, like, I don't know what they called Jerusalem before Israel, since Jerusalem is in Israel, like whatever the country or the borders was. Maybe there wasn't no borders, but yeah, like you would have think it would already been its own country, but it wasn't. And that's only 1948. I mean, that's literally only 70 something years ago.
May 15th, 1948 is when the war began, a day after Israel declared its independence. So while this was announced, the Arab states invaded Israel on all fronts, but the Israelis were able to repeal the invasion and even conquer some territories. The war ended on July 20th, 1949. It lasted a little over a year with the signing of armistice agreement between Israel, Egypt, Lebanon, Jordan, and Syria. This led to the displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians. The war also left a legacy of mistrust and animosity between Israel and Arab states for obvious reasons, and its consequences are still felt till today. Another factor to consider is the role that Cold War played in the instability.
And thing is Jerusalem's been conquered so many times, man. People have been fighting over that forever. And this idea that Jerusalem or Israel is separate from the Middle East or Africa is so bogus. It's like, it's so bogus. You know, it really is. We do know common sense and common knowledge would tell us that that region, original people in that region were either African or Arabs and not white Europeans.
Of the Middle East. Both the U.S. and Soviet Union supported different sides in the Arab-Israel conflict, and this led to constant proxy wars, similar to what's going on right now with Ukraine and Russia, where U.S. is kind of defending Ukraine and maybe China is defending Russia. Just think about similar situations taking place with what was taking place at that time. So obviously it doesn't stop there. Over the next 70 years, it's constant war after war after war, starting with the 1956 Suez Crisis, a war between Egypt, France, and the UK. Then you have the 1967 Six-Day War between Israel and a coalition of Arab states. Then you have the 1973 Yom Kippur War, a war between Israel and a coalition of Arab states. Then you have the 1979 Iran-Iraq War, which was obviously between Iran and Iraq, leading after the revolution when the Shah was in exile. And this war ended in 1988, a 9-year war. By the way, from 1979 to 1988, I lived in Iran, in the capital. We got bombed. It's a lot of ugly stuff. This really happened. That's a lot of agitation and anger that this causes in the people, and it was constant. Then in 1982, Lebanon war between Israel and a coalition of Lebanese and Palestinian forces. This war ended in 85. Then you have the 1991 Gulf War between a coalition of forces led by United States and Iraq. Then you have 2003 Iraq War, which lasted till 2011 with the withdrawal of U.S. forces from Iraq. Then you have the 2006 Lebanon War between Israeli and Hezbollah. The war ended in the same year, but no peace agreement was ever reached. Then you have the 2011 Syrian civil war. Then you have the 2014 to present Yemeni civil war, which eventually escalated into a proxy war between Saudi Arabia and Iran. The war has caused a humanitarian crisis in Yemen, and again, it has destabilized the region. When you think about this, the rise of Islamic terrorism over a 7-year period, this is like constant. And according to a 2022 study by Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, the Middle East and North Africa region has experienced the most warfare in the world the last 50 years, and the study found that the region has accounted for 38% of all armed conflicts between 1970 and 2021. It also found that the Middle East and North Africa region has experienced the most fatalities from warfare the last 50 years. Study also found that the region has accounted for 44% of all fatalities realities during that same period. So then I said, let's take a look at a couple other things. When it comes down to Islam as a religion, what is the overall divorce rate for Islam versus others? Well, the overall divorce rate in America is roughly 39%, right? Protestants are 33%, Catholics are 22%, Muslims are 13%. How often you hear about Muslims getting a divorce? 13%.
Hardly never.
They're big on family values, and maybe of the 20,000 people that converted in America to Muslim Americans, 75% are women, 15,000. Is that what they value? They want family values. They don't want the Muslim divorce and all this stuff happening. Maybe that's what it is. So then I'm like, okay, so marriages work out. How many kids do Muslims have? Then you look up the data here, again, on Pew Research, and no matter what part of the world it is, Muslims lead the way with 2.9 babies per woman, and Christians are second at 2.6. But if you go to every single region, Sub-Saharan Africa, number one Muslims at around 5.2. Middle East, North Africa, Muslims leading the way. North America, Muslims leading the way. Asia Pacific, Muslims leading the way. Europe, Muslims leading the way. So then I'm sitting down, we're having a conversation together during dinner. I said, so Muslims have to be conservative and Republican, right? Because it's about family values, it's about marriage, it's about kids, it's a strong faith, conservative. They're the most intolerant towards LGBTQ community. So what percentage of Muslims vote Republican versus Democrat? 70% of Muslims vote Democrat? We're having a conversation. Pat, it could be because of Israel. Okay, I can see the fact. So are you telling me Muslims in their mind on the way they vote, they're saying, well, the fact that Republicans defend Israel.
Yeah, Republicans are always going to defend Israel because there are a lot of Christians and whatnot. And they're definitely, like ignorant to the situation of Israel. Like, it's been conquered so many times over and over again. Like, the people now, the last set of people that have been there are basically the ancestors of the last conquerors. We know the French have conquered it. We know Arabs have took it back a couple times. It's always, people have been fighting over it forever. And let them finish this last little bit up.
We can't go that route because we're Muslim, but we're also not about this LGBTQ movement that's taking place, and we're about family values. So which way do we weigh it? Do we weigh it out more of us being Republican or Democrat? And watch what happened recently. In 2018, Muslims, only 17% of them voted Republican. Last year, 2022 midterms. You know what percentage? 28%. It
That's
increased by 11%. So
That's
maybe
big.
the last 4 years, Muslims are sitting there saying, yeah, I don't know, Democrats. I mean, I understand the fact that Israel is more something that's on the other side, but now it's both of you guys. I am no longer feeling what Democrats stand for. So maybe Muslims are going through the transition of wanting to say, we relate more to conservative Republicans, more maybe independents, way more than we do Democrats today. Is that an evolution that's taking place today? Who knows? That's what the data says, according to Wall Street Journal. You understand where I'm going, where my thought process is going, right? I mean, I'm processing this for myself. And at the same time,
I said this on a few videos, like the video where the teacher in Canada was trying to scold the kid, a Muslim kid, for skipping school during Pride Month and whatnot. I said, like, see, one of my rap partners is Muslim. And, I'm just applying common sense and common knowledge to know that they are going to push back on transgenderism a lot harder than Christians. I've stressed this, that Muslims are Muslim 7 days a week. It's not a part of their life. It's their way of life. A lot of Christians are, it's only part of their life. They're not Christians 7 days a week. They're part-timers. They're not as devout as Muslims are. So he's basically touching on where I'm going with it, that if this keeps up, no matter what, if Republicans support Israel or not, if it keeps up with pushing transgenderism and LGBTQ community and pride flags in the schools, Muslims are going to push back on that. They're going to probably vote Democrat less and less and less and less. And that's the thing, man. I think, like, if Democrats didn't have this transgenderism that they're pushing, they might be good to go. They might be good to go with Muslims still vote for them, and people might not be looking at them so sideways. But I think just the transgenderism alone and trying to force it on the kids, the LGBTQ community on the kids, that issue alone is going to sway a lot of Muslims to vote Republican, a lot of Democrats to vote Republican. People are gonna get tired of that shit after a while because you keep trying to force it upon everybody. You keep trying to force them to agree, accept, and support it. And that's transgenderism. I will never agree, accept, or support. I accept it as gay people in society. I just don't agree with it, and I don't support it. But this transgenderism, it's a whole different thing.
I'm looking at some of the churches, Christian churches in America, like one of them being thousands of Methodist churches flee over rift. What's going on? This is an article from Christian Post. In the last couple of months, thousands more houses of worship have left the United Methodist.
And that's the thing about the Christians. Like I said, they're not all full-timers. They're all, some of them part-time. They're don't, they change. Like the Bible tells you what you're supposed to accept and not accept, and they choose to ignore it. So they're not really Christians. They're just, bend the words to fit their narrative, to fit their outlook.
Church having their disaffiliation votes approved by their UMC conferences. Updated total shows that as many as 6,000 churches have fled the UMC in the last couple of years. That's a lot of churches. And the issue shows no signs of slowing down. And even a Christian Post reporter, Michael Grabowski, said the following: for the last several decades, the United Methodist Church has been in a big debate about whether to change its official stance on LGBTQ issues. Currently, the UMC prohibits the blessing of same-sex unions and the ordination of non-celibate homosexuals. So Methodists are sitting there saying, well, the direction you're going, you're being a little bit too comfortable with LGBTQ. That's not part of our religion. Christians are going through it. Catholics are going through it. I had one of my guys today send me a picture about a big church in DC that has a big pride flag. This is the National City Christian Church from DC. This is taking place. At the same time, recently, Bishop Strickland keeps pushing the envelope. He's out of Tyler, Texas, and he's on the heels of apostolic visitation. The Pope is not happy that this bishop from the Catholic Church is pushing the fact that we shouldn't be LGBTQ. So then are Muslims, conservative Christians, some of these real conservative Catholics are coming together and saying, listen, we're tolerant to a lot of things. We are not tolerant to LGBTQ being okay with all this other stuff. Maybe Muslims, conservative Christians, and these guys are finding each other. Kind of weird. They're sitting there.
I've been saying that. I said it probably a month or so before he even did this video. Maybe a couple months ago. I've talked with a couple friends about this, and just, putting common sense and common knowledge to this, and knowing how Muslims are, like 7 days a week, praying 2-3 times a day, the fasting, Ramadan, all that stuff. They're not going to go for that. They're not going to, like, Muslims aren't going to allow anybody to indoctrinate their kids but them. And Christians, like I said, they're part-timers. They're not all full-timers. Now, if you like my sister and my brother-in-law, they're not about to let you indoctrinate their kids. And they're real Christians. They're just great, decent human beings. Raise their kids right from wrong. Teach their kids to not hate, and things of that nature, man. But they're not going to let you indoctrinate their kids with things they disagree with and whatnot. And I think, and that's the thing, I'm not religious at all. My religion would be natural law, the laws of nature, Like, if animals don't do it, to me, it doesn't exist. It's not supposed to be done. It's just man just trying to damn, if you could think it, they do it. That's the problem, man. If we think it, we will do it or attempt to do it. But yeah, this video, it was a couple of things they tackled in there, stereotypes and the terrorism. But like, let me get into that part of the war part. A lot of civil war going on since the Ottoman Empire broke up. You got the British and the French sticking their nose into it. It makes me think of the Black Hawk Down movie when they captured the general at the beginning, and he says, "This is civil war. You know, you don't got no. Why are you here? You know, you should be sticking your nose in civil war." That's why it's called civil war. Like once people stick their nose in a civil war and go in the middle of a civil war, it's not a civil war no more. It's just war. Like, who came to the rescue of America when the North fought the South in the Civil War? It was the North versus the South. There was no other countries. There might have been countries that were giving us arms and weapons and things of that nature on both sides of the fence. The British might have been arming the North and the South. They probably were more likely because they still wanted the cotton in the South, you know. But once actual soldiers step in, it's not a civil war, and civil wars um, probably should be handled internally. You know, they probably should be handled internally. Civil wars are always going to happen within countries, especially with countries that have dictators and rulers that are keeping the people on their thumb. So yeah, man. I mean, what do we expect? What do we expect? Like that, so the Middle East is probably going to have civil wars for a long time. We broke up the Ottoman Empire. Which was probably that's the thing. We don't like empires. You know, Soviet Union, Ottoman Empire. We got to break all these countries up, and like you got people fighting over borders, and you got two sets of Muslims. One thinks the leaders should be voted on, and the others think they should be descendants of Muhammad. Which I don't know how you're going to find that part out. You know, how are you going to tell if they're descendants of Muhammad or not? And I don't know if I believe in Muhammad or Jesus even exists, or like, what's the proof? And Muhammad seems more realistic than Jesus because, you know, Jesus is just too much magical stuff going on that doesn't really coincide with reality. Yeah, this is an interesting video. Very, very interesting video. I don't know if I want to say those stereotypes are true. I don't think most Muslims are terrorists. I think it's a small portion, but I think it's a portion that's just definitely fed up with all the civil war, with the fact that the Ottoman Empire even broke up, and the Western civilizations are sticking their nose in there because they're after all the oil and the resources, you know. But that's the thing, like, countries always conquer for resources. They don't do this shit just for sport, just for fun. Once again, I'll thank y'all for tuning in. Paul Pickett Podcast, and I'm out.